during the darkest years of World War II, when the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans had become vast killing fields scarred by burning oil slicks, sinking hulls, and the ceaseless roar of anti-aircraft guns. Nazi Germany's military-industrial complex chased increasingly fantastical solutions to reverse the tide of defeat, while Allied fleets grew ever more dominant, carrier task forces dominating the skies, battleships still trading salvos in the occasional surface action, and submarines strangling supply lines. German engineers, sheltered in heavily guarded drawing offices and remote proving grounds, poured their dwindling resources into weapons of almost mythical scale. Among the most nightmarish of these unrealized projects was a family of super-heavy armor-piercing shells, projectiles so enormous and so carefully engineered that they promised, at least on slide rule calculations and wind tunnel models, to rewrite the rules of naval gunnery and render even the most heavily armored capital ships catastrophic ally vulnerable from unperceived NTED ranges. The most famous platform associated with this ambition was the 80 cm Schwerer Gustav and its nearly identical sister Dora, products of the Krupp conglomerate under the personal patronage of Adolf Hitler and overseen by the obsessive genius of chief designer Erich Mller. Gustav's barrel alone measured 30 to 0.48 meters longer than most destroyers were wide, and the complete weapon assembly, including its massive carriage and recoil-dampening mechanisms, weighed roughly 1,350 metric tons. The gun could lob to principal types of ammunition over distances approaching 47 kilometers when elevated to maximum angle. The high-explosive shell, weighing approximately 4,800 kg, was devastating against fixed fortifications. It had been used to pulverize Sevastopol's concrete bunkers and underground magazines in the summer of 1942, sending shock waves through the earth that registered on distant seismographs. But the true terror weapon, the one that haunted Allied intelligence assessments and post-war technical analyses, was the armor-piercing AP round, designated variously as the 80 cm SGR, L for MHP, or simply the Behemoth in some internal documents. This AP shell weighed between 7,100 and 7,200 kilograms depending on the exact variant, more than 7 metric tons of machined steel, tungsten carbide core elements, and high-explosive filler. Its nose was fitted with a hardened, blunt-nose ballistic cap windshield designed to shatter only after initial contact, preserving the integrity of the underlying penetrator body. Behind that sat a thick, heat-treated steel body tapering to a long, boat-tailed base, giving the projectile superb ballistic coefficient for extreme range flight. Inside, a delayed action base fuse, sophisticated for the era, was engineered to arm only after surviving the V-EOLI anti-deceleration of penetrating dozens of centimeters or even meters of face-hardened armor plate. Once triggered, the shell's explosive charge, estimated at 300 C/100 kg of high-grade or DXTNT mixture, would detonate deep within a ship's vitals, machinery spaces, boiler rooms, turret magazines, or command decks. German ballistic tables projected that, at ranges between 30 and 40 kilometers under ideal conditions, the round could defeat between 500 and 650 mm of vertical belt armor, depending on angle of fall and impact obliquity, and still carry enough residual energy to burrow several additional meters before exploding. Such performance figures, if realized, would have placed virtually every Allied battleship in mortal danger. The British King George V class carried a main belt of 374 mm inclined at 15 degrees, effective thickness roughly 390 C/100 mm against flat trajectory fire. while the later Lion-class designs on paper offered up to 381 mm. American fast battleships of the Iowa class relied on a 307 mm belt inclined at 19 degrees effective thickness around 340 c 360 mm at long range, backed by splinter decks and torpedo bulges. Even the older, but still formidable Nelson and Rodney classes, with their 356 mm belts, would have struggled to stop a clean hit from an 80 cm AP shell arriving at a steep angle of fall. A single such projectile detonating inside a magazine could trigger a cordite or powder explosion of chain reaction proportions. A hit in the engineering spaces could leave a ship dead in the water, easy prey for follow-up strikes or torpedoes. German planners fantasized about coastal batteries of Gustav-type weapons sighted along the Atlantic Wall or Norwegian fjords, or even more ambitiously mounted aboard gigantic hybrid battleship gun platforms under the ever-expanding Plan Z naval construction program. These naval dreams included the successive H-class battleship studies, H-39 with 40.6 cm guns, H-41 with 42 cm weapons, H-40 through H-40 for escalating to twin 50.8 cm or even 50 cm plus main batteries, and wilder paper projects contemplating 60 cm or larger artillery. In these late war fantasies, the super heavy AP shell would have been scaled accordingly, projectiles weighing 10 c 20 tons or more, fired from guns whose recoil forces alone would have demanded hulls approaching 100,000 c 150,000 tons displacement. Designers sketched turret arrangements with 3 quadruple or even quintuple mounts, each barrel longer than a football field, capable of hurling shells across horizons that no optical rangefinder or radar of the day could relier. Fly-track moving targets at. Yet every layer of this grandiose vision crumbled under wartime reality. The Gustav guns themselves proved hideously immobile. Moving one weapon required dismantling it into segments, loading them onto specially reinforced 80-axle rail cars, laying double-track temporary lines with curves no tighter than 10 km radius, constructing enormous concrete emplacements with curved recoil pits, and dedicating thousands of troops and anti-aircraft batteries solely to protect the site. Even then, sustained fire was limited. Each round took 30 c 45 minutes to load. Barrel wear was catastrophic after only dozens of shots, and accuracy against maneuvering naval targets would have been abysmal without modern digital fire control. No realistic method existed to mount such artillery afloat without creating an unworkably top-heavy, slow, and vulnerable monstrosity. By 1940, 3C 1940 for the industrial base that might have turned blueprints into steel was collapsing. Allied strategic bombing systematically gutted the Ruhr, destroyed Krupp's Essen works, severed rail arteries, and scattered skilled workers. Tungsten for hardcores, chromium and nickel for armor-grade steel. Explosives precursors all were in desperately short supply. Hitler's growing fixation on vengeance weapons V-1 flying bombs, V-2 rockets, Me-260 jets, and ever larger artillery pieces siphoned away the last reserves of talent, machine tools, and electric power. The Kriegsmarine surface fleet had been reduced to a handful of crippled heavy units hiding in Norwegian fjords. No new battleship keel had any realistic prospect of completion. Thus the super heavy armor-piercing shell remained confined to test ranges near our General P. Penn and Heller's Leben, fired perhaps a handful of times against salvaged armor plate or dummy targets, its muzzle flashes briefly lighting up Baltic or North Sea nights before the weapons were dismantled or abandoned. Intelligence reports reached London and Washington describing Hitler's monster guns and super shells, but no Allied battleship ever felt the weight of one descending from the stratosphere. No King George V shuddered under the impact of 7 tons of steel burrowing through its belt. No Iowa-class turret rang with the hammer blow of delayed detonation deep in its citadel in this weapon. Like so many of the Third Reich's late-war obsessions, the 1000-ton land cruiser, P.1000 rat tank, the Silbervogel antipodal bomber, the 15 cm naval warfare on steroids exists only as grainy photographs of unfinished prototypes, faded ballistic tables, and the recollections of surviving engineers interrogated in 1945. It never altered a single naval engagement. It never proved whether its terrifying specifications were realistic or merely the product of wishful extrapolation under pressure. It never gave history the chance to record the sight of an Allied battleship splitting apart in a pillar of flame and smoke after absorbing one perfect apocalyptic hit, and yet the very existence of such a projectile conceived, calculated, partially fabricated, and then abandoned serves as one of the war's most unsettling footnotes. It reminds us that some of the gravest dangers are not the catastrophes that actually occurred, but those that hovered just beyond realization, restrained only by the narrowing margin of time, resources, and sanity. Had the industrial miracle persisted a few months longer, had the skies been contested differently, had a single battery been emplaced on the French coast in the desperate summer of 1940, for how many capital ships might have vanished beneath the waves in minutes rather than hours? How many admirals' war diaries might contain entries describing the impossible? A distant flash, a rising plume, then silence where a 45,000-ton battle line once steamed. The shell never spoke. Its silence is perhaps the loudest echo of all.